good to be a Clinton. Damn, it feels good to be a Clinton. A shameless politician always plays her cards right. Got a crew for the fight on the airwaves. Left dogs in the press keep the mouths tight. Cause a Clinton never needs to explain why it is what they done or with who. A real Clinton knows that they're entitled. And you don't get to know what they do.
What difference does it make?
All right. What difference does it make for a Clinton?
Yes.
I haven't played that for a couple weeks. I love that.
We'll just have to wait for FBI Director Comey to say what difference is it going to make.
Yeah, no kidding. All right, we're going to move on. We have with us returning guest, Communications Director for Club for Growth, Doug Sachtleben. Doug, good morning.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for having me on again.
Great to have you. I'm not sure what we're going to talk about, though. I know originally we wanted to talk about how Donald Trump needed to win New York, but he did that. And
California.
California might be next. If there's something you want to talk about that you guys are doing at Club for Growth, then let's just go there.
Yeah, I mean, we are. We're looking at Indiana. Obviously, we expect that Trump will still continue to have a good week this coming week in some of the Mid-Atlantic states, and so we put up some advertising in Indiana and are focused there, just more as a firewall at this point, and still of the belief that Trump doesn't get to 1237 before the convention. So we'll focus on Indiana, probably California down the road. But admittedly, it continues to be an uphill fight.
We had Mark Meckler on earlier in the show, and we were talking specifically about the convention, brokered convention, the outcome. He seemed pretty certain that there would definitely be that nobody would have enough delegates and that there would be a vote. But he seems to think that that everybody's going to come together behind somebody, whether it's Trump or Cruz. What do you think about that?
I fully agree with Mark on that. We've kind of been monitoring as everybody has some of the RNC discussions down in Florida this week, and we've said all along this idea of Kasich and or dropping in someone else is just fantasy. To change the rules, and they tried to make an effort at it this past week. And clearly were met with some resistance. One of the sources that we talked to said, there's really not an appetite at this point to try to play with the rules. And part of that is, I think, some of the RNC telegraphed kind of early on that they were willing to do just about anything, including playing those kind of shenanigans with the rules, and it put them under the microscope. And now they realize it's not a smart thing to do, and the best thing they could do is let it come down to a two-man race, and most of the delegates are going to be Cruz and Trump delegates there at the convention. So let them be the ones that ultimately decide this runoff, rather than try to play some kind of games that add further problems to the party that already has enough right now.
Yeah, Rick Olson here. Thanks for coming on. Appreciate it. I'm one of the lone holdouts here at the Grok Crew. I'm a Trump supporter. And the message I've been giving to my fellow Trumpkins is that at the end of the day, if Ted Cruz is the nominee, you guys got to drop this idea of staying home, and you've got to support the nominee. And I think that message is beginning to resonate a little bit. So inversely, if it's Donald Trump, obviously we got to support the nominee. But if in fact it unfolds to be Ted Cruz, likewise, he's the nominee that we shall support. And I've said that I'm all in if that happens.
I've said, and not that the Cruz campaign has any interest in my thoughts on this, but I really do think that if they were to be the ones to end up with the nomination, if Cruz comes out of it with the nomination, I think it's vital for Cruz and company to make it very clear that, like or dislike Donald Trump as far as the personality goes and some of the issues, the fact is he's resonated and he's done something. I mean, I think what we've seen in a lot of stories is part of the Trump motivation over the last perhaps decade has been the notion that Republicans have dismissed him. Frankly, when he first came out last June, we dismissed him at that point, and he's now proven that we were all wrong in terms of just dismissing him as a candidate. And I think it's vital at that point then for the senator and others to say, listen, the guy has changed the Republican Party, has brought in something that we had not measured or gauged before, and need to appreciate that and move forward, in a united sort of way. I don't know if that'll happen, but I do think you're right, Rick. It's going to be interesting to see what happens after we come out of Cleveland.
Doug, this is Skip, and again, thanks for coming on the show. My question comes more from the personal. You know, the progressives have always had the mantra of the political is the personal is the political. And really, I have seen this. I don't think I've seen this level of rancor since Ronald Reagan ran. Where I'm looking at Donald Trump, and I look at the level of insults that he has been hurling at basically everybody who starts to come after him to gain the number one spot in this race. And certainly Cruz has been answering, a little bit more highbrow than not. Kasich's kind of stayed out of it. But I'm wondering, how hard do you think this is going to be for people to be able to coalesce? For instance, would Ted Cruz actually say, after listening for months, lying Ted Cruz, it's one thing to say, okay, yeah, I'll fall in line, but it's going to be tepid.
Skip, as listening to there, I was just old enough, to have voted for Reagan the second time around, but I was at a meeting not long ago with some folks who were part of that campaign, who've got me by about 10 years, and who were part of all of the Bush-Reagan days, and they will tell you, one of the people, in fact, made a comment, and she said it was remarkable how for so long after that Reagan-Bush election, people still remained divided based on, oh, you supported Bush, oh, you were with Reagan. And it was so hard within the Republican Party. There were so many hurt feelings, and moving forward was difficult. I tend to believe, as you're saying, this has gone to even a deeper, more intense level, and that divide is really vast. And I think a lot then depends on how Donald handles himself. I mean, we saw Tuesday night after New York, there was a little bit more sober side that I think people appreciated, and he's gone right back to the lion's head. But if there's an opportunity here to bridge the gap, certainly hope he would, but I'm not confident that that'll be the case. And ultimately, all roads then end up pointing to Hillary.
I mean, I can bring up the Reagan race, but going back to the beginning of our foundation, to the first few presidential races, if you think it's bad now, it was worse back then. There was a reason why the founders put the First Amendment in, was to protect all these political pamphleteers, which they were just outrageous at what was going on. The point is, though, I'm looking at... I just lost my train of thought.
Oh, hey.
Dang. I'll have to come back to it again.
Come up with something else quick. I was going to say that, and along those lines, given the tenor of the narrative and the conversation, squirrels, yes, derailed his train of thought, you did. And, that is a question. Is it possible? I mean, I've said that I thought that if Trump won, he should take Cruz as a VP, even though it's been as caustic as it is, and then he gets, by default, most of the Cruz supporters. I don't know that it works in reverse that way, but, I'm thinking about it because that's kind of what I do. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think what Skip was just saying, just historically, I mean, that history is at least encouraging in saying, if you do look back at some of these and some of the bitter, vindictive narrative that's been there, that somehow out of it has come some level of good governance, and a fair amount of that has been, even in the Republican Party's history. You have to hope that at some level, when you see the course that the country has been on for the last near 8 years now, that we really want to see just the influence on the federal courts, the ability to appoint judges right on up to the Supreme Court. There's so much at stake that if there's not a commitment at that point to try to actually turn things and come together on what can be agreed on, we're in rough shape, at that point. And then you're talking down ticket. I mean, your senator there from New Hampshire, and I could name, easily 4, 5, 6 other races where the down ballot effect of a party that remains in a level of crisis is going to be devastating and is going to lose us the Senate.
There isn't nearly as much conversation about the division on the left between Sanders and Clinton. Obviously,
but it's starting.
It's been going on for a while. The Sanders people are bitter, of course, obviously, because they think it's rigged, and it is. But what do you think about that side? I mean, I guess basically the perspective on the division. Is it real? How much of an effect do you think it will have on the nominating process and on the general election?
And how can you exploit it?
Yeah, that's the good question at the end too. Is how you do it, because my quick response to what you were first saying there, and it's probably a pretty biased response, is the Democrats, I think, and again, this is coming from a conservative Republican, but I think thrive on low information voters who they can say, you got to vote D. Whatever has the D after it, you just vote for. And the principal issue is not as important. So you will have a lot of that younger population that has been interested in Bernie and following Bernie. We saw some of that growth in that voter base under Obama, but still not to the level that people had projected going into 2008 and 2012. So I don't know how enormous of a loss that is if that group still sits this one out. I think, frankly, the major cities and the minority vote that the Democrats have always excelled at, getting to turn out on Election Day and not really focus on the candidate, just vote D. I think that's still going to be very tough to overcome. How we exploit it, that's a great question. I think you're more exploiting just the fact that Hillary's such a terrible candidate, and so many of the polls of even Democrats show they struggle to trust her or like her, and she's got to be portrayed as somebody who's untrustworthy and unlikable. Certainly Bernie hasn't hit her. At times he's hit her on that, but not enough to make a difference.
I've always said that one of the reasons Dunkin' Donuts is so popular in Massachusetts is because it has 2 D's in it.
That's a good explanation right there.
So,
you're making me question my liking of Dunkin' Donuts.
No, I'm drinking it right now. I just
Okay,
every Saturday morning. Yeah, I would say that for the Bernie supporters, maybe it is the young voters. That you can get them to stay home. It's not that hard.
Yeah, especially if a lot of them were those kids that came off the Occupy movement, Yeah.
And historically, that group just doesn't. There's always the talk of what influence that group could bring. And if Bernie was in, I suspect, if he became the Democratic candidate, you might attract some of that hasn't been there before. But Obama struggled to still bring that. As much as they say they want that youth vote, it's still, when it comes down to November, a lot of that 18 to 25-year-old group really isn't as motivated to get out as we seem to think beforehand.
A question for you. Talking about low information voters and the young, obviously a lot of times the two are the same. But I remarked earlier on the show of look at all the money that Bernie has raised in small donations. And while that it's great because it proves that you don't have to have big money in a race to actually make it work, I'm just absolutely sick over the fact that an open socialist here in America is getting that much money. Open socialist, pretty much a closet communist when you really look at some of the stuff that he has done.
Not so much closet either.
No, not really. He's not hiding it that
It's
much.
a transparent closet.
It's a transparent closet. There's no door on the closet.
But I'm looking at it from the low voters, and I've written extensively about it on Granite Rock, about, it's because our education system doesn't teach our real history and real philosophy. You at Club for the Growth do a lot of ads. How do you reach these folks that really don't know what socialism really means? How do you combat that?
Well, that's a fantastic question, and I think as you were getting at, I was just thinking that it's the history that's the problem, the communication of history, plus the mentality of the last 8 years. I think, and I don't think Republicans, I don't want to put this in a way that we've hurt ourselves by doing this, but I think we've accurately portrayed some of Obama's policies as socialist in nature and ultimately wanting to move more in that direction. And frankly, a lot on the Democrat side seem to like that idea. And amongst the younger voters, I think the mentality has become, oh, okay, well, if that's what socialist is, then socialist must be good. And I don't know how in 30-second, even 1-minute ads, we reverse that when it's becomes so ingrained, especially in the higher education system. I think at some level Republicans have to offer better inviting opportunities to what opportunity means to actually succeed on your own and get wealth and find out what it's like to prosper. And we've got to portray that and communicate that and do it by policy and engaging. I think Reagan certainly was the model of doing that, but even guys like Jack Kemp over the years trying to show that there's this capitalist side is not this evil side, but it's actually the side that gives you the most freedom to pursue. But we're up against a real tide, in the education system that makes that very tough.
Skip.
Yeah. My wife and I ran a daycare center, and as part of that, because the same folks that would evaluate our daycare center for all the right stuff were also the ones that said, you need to take these basically DCYF kids and accept our low rates. So I had a lot of single moms in our lobby all the time, and I could hear them talking about how to get more free stuff. And we had a couple of people who used that as a stepping stone and made things of themselves. But too many of these young mothers and their broken down, stupid boyfriends, lazabouts in the garage drinking beer during the day, they were perfectly happy to get all the free stuff. And I saw it getting worse and worse. And now with both Hillary and Bernie saying, we'll give you free this, free that, free this, free that, it's like, how do you... I understand the opportunity, but how do you say, don't take the free stuff? That's a hard sell. I don't know how to do it.
No. A friend of mine was a little older than me, actually wrote back in one of the second Reagan campaign, did some speech writing, has been involved in messaging for Republicans for years, and his argument is that we've moved to a completely consumer-oriented culture, which, of course, favors then exactly what you're saying, whoever gives away the most. And somehow we as conservatives have to find a way to say, this is what government can do for you in terms of security and opportunity. And as I listened, I mean, I'm moved by the things that he was saying. That's the things I think government should do is pave the way and get out of the way. But to match that up against an ad that says government will, take care of your health care, take care of your college loans, and anything else they can think of in a consumer-oriented culture, it's an old message, unfortunately, on our part, but it's one we've got to stick with. I just don't know how you overcome the salesmanship side other than to show people what it looks like to truly succeed on your own with individual liberty and not with the government there boosting you up in some way.
Yeah, and we've got Republicans actually reinforcing that message.
Yep.
I think that there's got to be a way, because there's only so much the government can do. There's only a level of, we'll call it prosperity with air quotes, that you can achieve living on the dole. It's obviously gotten a lot better in recent years than it has in the past, but there's got to be a point at which you can't get a better life if you rely on the government.
But they don't care.
I know they don't, but there are people who do care.
Yep.
I mean, there are people who do care. There are people who will get tired of being the guy who drinks beer in the garage. There are people out there like that. I mean, we have 93 million Americans who used to have jobs and don't. I don't think those are the people that are going to sit in a garage and drink beer. Some of them are, but not all of them. So I think we need to find a way to reach those people. But we've run out of time. How do people reach you, sir?
Clubforgrowth.org. If they check us out there, clubforgrowth.org, they'll find out all about us. They can follow us at Twitter, and there it's club and the number 4 growth. As our Twitter handle. We'd love for people to check us out, see what we're doing, and you can join up for free and get our emails and catch up on a lot of House and Senate races where we're engaged right now.
All right, Doug Sachtleben, Club for Growth, thank you so much, and you have a great weekend.
Always a pleasure, guys. Thanks so much.
Thanks, sir.
Doug.
We will be right back. Stay tuned.
Rock.